Mary's hands shook so violently the photo frame almost slipped from her fingers. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to step inside a world built on marble floors and chandeliers worth more than everything she had owned in her entire life. Yet here she stood, breath unsteady, staring at a picture that pulled the ground out from beneath her. Her mother, smiling, younger, standing beside a man she had sworn she never knew, was framed neatly in a billionaire's mansion as if she had always belonged there. Mary felt her throat tighten, her chest burning with confusion and betrayal. Across the room, Richard Hale, the man whose face appeared in magazines and business shows, froze in place, suddenly stripped of all the confidence the world admired him for. His eyes widened with the kind of fear you only see when a buried truth claws its way back to the surface. Mary lifted her head, tears rolling freely now, her voice cracking with a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief that almost didn't sound like her own. "Why is my mother in your house?" The question drifted through the air like a blade, sharp enough to tear open decades of silence. Richard's lips parted, but no words came at first, only the trembling exhale of a man cornered by the past he thought would never return. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. "Mary, there's something you don't know. Something your mother never told you. Something I never forgave myself for." The room felt suddenly smaller, as though the walls were listening. And for the first time in years, Richard Hale looked less like a billionaire and more like a man drowning in the weight of his own history. How did a poor girl selling oranges on a roadside end up standing inside a billionaire's mansion holding a photograph that threatened to unravel everything she believed about her past? The question lingers, stirring curiosity and emotion in equal measure. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. In that moment, the entire story hangs at the edge of revelation, a secret kept hidden for years, a connection Mary never imagined, a truth powerful enough to change the course of her life, the kind of truth that forces you to ask yourself, what would you do if the one thing you thought you understood about your family was suddenly rewritten in a single moment? Mary's story began long before she ever stepped foot inside that mansion. 10 years earlier, she was just a small girl living with her mother, Clara, in a cramped apartment where the paint peeled from the walls and the windows rattled whenever the wind passed through. Their room smelled faintly of damp clothes and the mint lotion Clara used to ease the pain in her chest. Money never stretched far enough. Support never came from anywhere, and the medicine Clara needed cost more than they could ever save. So Mary, only 10, but carrying the weight of someone much older, woke up each morning before sunrise, gathered a small basket of oranges, and walked to the roadside to sell them. Cars sped past her, the air filled with dust and heat, but Mary stayed there every day, hoping someone would buy enough to keep her mother alive for one more week. Even at that young age, Mary sensed there were parts of her mother's life she had been carefully shielded from. Whenever Mary asked about Clara's childhood or whether she had family somewhere else, Clara would smile faintly and change the subject. She always avoided sharing details, as if every memory behind her eyes carried more pain than joy. In the corner of their small room sat a wooden box with a faded lock, never opened, always dusted, treated almost like something sacred. Mary once touched it out of curiosity, and Clara snatched it away with a trembling hand, apologizing before Mary could even react. And whenever Mary mentioned the wealthier neighborhoods with their quiet streets and polished houses, Clara's entire body tensed. Her voice became firm, urgent. She told Mary never to wander there, never to step near that side of town, no matter how curious she became. As the years passed, Clara's health declined faster than either of them could keep up with. Her cough deepened, her breaths grew painful, and the nights were filled with moments Mary stayed awake just to make sure if her mother was still breathing. The medicine cost more each month, and Mary found herself selling oranges for longer hours, skipping meals so she wouldn't dip into the little money they had saved. The responsibility pressed heavily on her young shoulders, yet she carried it because she knew no one else would. The fear settled in quietly that one day she might come home with the medicine too late. Viewers might ask themselves how it would feel to watch someone you love fade slowly, knowing you are the only one fighting to keep them here. What choices would you make? How far would you go if survival depended on your efforts alone? As Mary grew older and Clara's condition grew worse, desperation slowly pushed her toward a part of town her mother had always warned her about. One afternoon, after selling barely enough oranges to buy half the medicine she needed, Mary made a decision she could not explain, even to herself. She walked towards the rich neighborhood, the place with spotless sidewalks and tall gates that blocked the world she knew. As she stepped inside, she immediately felt out of place, her worn sandals tapping softly against the immaculate pavement. That was when a luxury car drove past her, slowed, circled the block and passed her again, the tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. She tried ignoring it, but a knot formed in her stomach. People from this neighborhood rarely noticed someone like her, yet something about her presence seemed to draw attention she didn't understand. As she continued walking, she felt eyes on her. Mary looked up and saw a man standing behind a second-floor window of a large mansion, completely still, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. The curtains beside him swayed slightly, hinting he had been there longer than she thought. Near the gate of the same mansion sat an old child's toy, faded, dusty, out of place in a property where everything else looked polished and perfect. Something about it felt strange, almost forgotten. As she stepped closer, a window on the upper floor suddenly slammed shut as if someone inside didn't want her to see something. She paused, startled. Then she noticed the security camera above the gate turning, adjusting its angle, following her too closely for it to be accidental. It didn't shift away. It didn't blink. It watched her as though it recognized her. Mary swallowed her fear and pressed the gate bell. For a moment, nothing happened, only the quiet hum of the neighborhood's stillness. Then she heard footsteps echoing from somewhere beyond the gate, then voices, muffled, tense, almost as if two people were arguing about something urgent. A door slammed. A woman's cry broke through the silence, a sound filled with pain or regret. She couldn't tell which. She stood frozen, her heart racing, wondering why a stranger's mansion sounded like a place full of secrets. Viewers might feel the same questions rising inside them. Who else was in that house? Why was someone crying? And why did the man who answered seem almost afraid to speak to her? The gate remained closed, a little too long enough for Mary's mind to drift toward the possibilities her mother had never allowed her to consider. Something about this place felt connected to her somehow, though she couldn't explain why. Every small detail, the circling car, the watching figure, the dusty toy, the sudden slam of the window, felt like pieces of a story she had not been told. And just as she took a small step back, wondering if she should leave, the narrator's voice settles in to guide the viewer deeper. But Mary had no idea that stepping inside that mansion would uncover a secret 11 years in the making. The moment hangs in the air, urging viewers to question what they would have done in her place. Would they have turned back? Or curiosity pull them toward the very truth they were never meant to discover? When the gate finally opened, Mary stepped inside the mansion with the hesitant footsteps of someone unsure whether they were trespassing or invited. The air inside the house felt strangely still, almost too calm for a place so large. As she followed the billionaire through the foyer, she kept her eyes down at first, afraid to appear out of place. But when she finally lifted her gaze, her breath caught in her throat. On the wall beside the staircase hung a framed photograph of her mother, smiling, younger, her eyes bright in a way Mary hadn't seen since childhood. Mary froze, unable to move. She felt her pulse quicken, her mind racing to understand what she was seeing. Why would her mother's image be here, displayed so openly in a stranger's home? The billionaire walked ahead without noticing she had stopped, but Mary couldn't take her eyes off the picture. She forced herself to move again, trying to steady her breathing, but just a few steps later she saw another picture. This time her mother was dressed in a formal gown, elegant and confident, standing in the kind of event Mary only saw on television. Her posture, her smile, even the background, all of it contradicted the life Mary knew her mother had lived.
Clara had never owned a dress like that. She had never spoken of attending any gala or knowing people who lived this kind of life. Mary felt her hands tremble as she reached toward the frame. Then her eyes landed on a third photo, Clara laughing, someone's hand resting on her waist. The person's face was cropped out, but the familiarity of the setting made Mary's stomach twist. She felt faint, as though the walls were closing in, challenging everything she believed about her mother. When the billionaire finally turned and saw Mary holding the third photograph, he stopped mid-step. His expression shifted into something unreadable, shock, fear, and resignation, all fighting for space. Mary asked him how her mother's pictures were inside his mansion, but he didn't answer. Instead, he fumbled for words that had nothing to do with her questions. "Sit. You must be hungry." His voice shook. "Let me get you water." He reached out as if to take the frame from her hands, then quickly pulled back. "Don't touch that." Every sentence he spoke felt like an attempt to lead her away from the truth. Mary noticed how his eyes darted around the room, how he seemed unusually nervous in his own home, and suddenly the mansion felt wrong, too quiet, too clean, too empty, too controlled, as though every detail had been arranged to hide something rather than display it. Mary looked around again, taking in the perfectly polished surfaces, the silence that lingered in the hallways, and the absence of clutter you would expect in a lived-in home. She couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion wasn't just quiet, it was avoiding her. Every corner seemed to hold something she wasn't meant to see, and every step forward felt like a step deeper into a story that didn't belong to her, yet somehow did. The narrator's voice returns, guiding the viewer into the next layer of mystery. But if Clara had nothing to do with this mansion, why were there photos of her hidden in every corner? This question presses against the viewer's mind, forcing them to consider what kind of connection could tie a struggling single mother to a world of wealth she never claimed, and more importantly, why she kept that part of her life locked away from her own daughter. Mary sensed a shift in the room the moment the billionaire finally allowed himself to look directly at her. His voice softened in a way that felt almost unfamiliar coming from a man of his status, as if the strength he usually relied on had been stripped away by memories he had spent years trying to bury. He quietly admitted that he had known Clara many years ago, long before Mary was born, long before their lives went in opposite directions. He didn't offer details, and his hesitation only deepened the unease growing inside her. He simply said she had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind unanswered questions he had never been able to resolve. Hearing those words made Mary's chest tighten. Disappeared? Clara had always insisted they moved constantly because of rent or work or health. Never once did she hint she was running from a past life. The billionaire stepped closer, his tone shifting from nostalgic to strangely cautious, as if he was taking mental notes with each answer Mary might give. He asked him how long her mother had been sick, his voice carrying an edge of concern that felt too personal, coming from someone she supposedly didn't know. Mary told him it had been years, and his eyebrows pulled together with a grief she didn't understand. Then he asked if Clara ever talked about her past, and before she could answer, he followed with another question that made Mary's stomach drop. "Do you know your father?" The room seemed to go silent around her. The question itself wasn't unusual, but the way he asked it, heavy, nervous, almost pleading, made her feel as though he was searching for a truth she didn't know existed. Mary felt fear curl inside her, subtle but unmistakable. She took a small step back, suddenly overwhelmed. Her instincts told her to leave, to run, to get out of a place that held far too many secrets connected to a woman who begged her to avoid this very neighborhood. She mumbled that she needed to go home, but before she could reach the hallway, the billionaire gently moved to stand in front of her. Not forceful, not threatening, just desperate. His hands trembled slightly at his sides, and his voice cracked as he asked her to wait. Mary froze, unsure whether to trust him or fear him. Everything about him suggested a man haunted by something he could no longer hide. Yet his desperation felt human, not dangerous. She could sense it in the way he held himself, the way he kept swallowing as though words were fighting their way upward but couldn't escape. The air grew heavier between them as he struggled to find the right words. His gaze shifted toward the photographs on the wall, then back to Mary, as if he were silently asking for permission to speak a truth he had avoided for more than a decade. Mary felt her heart pounding, torn between wanting answers and wanting to run far from the mansion that seemed to pulse with hidden stories. The billionaire finally drew a slow breath, his voice lowering into something raw and sincere. "Mary, I need to tell you something." He glanced around the empty room as though checking for anyone who might overhear. His tone deepened, weighted down by emotion. "But not here." The sentence lingered in the quiet, settling into Mary's mind like the edge of a secret she wasn't sure she was ready to hear, yet knew she couldn't walk away from. To understand the weight behind the billionaire's trembling voice, the story steps backwards, 10 years before Mary ever picked up her first basket of oranges. In those days, Clara was a young woman working quietly inside the mansion, cleaning rooms that were filled with more luxury than she had ever known. She moved through the hallways like a shadow, unnoticed by most of the family who lived there. The billionaire's relatives looked down on her, treating her presence as an inconvenience rather than respecting the work she did. Yet through the cold treatment and the dismissive looks, there was one person who saw her differently. The billionaire, years younger then, noticed her kindness, her strength, the way she carried her responsibilities even when exhaustion weighed on her. What began as brief conversations slowly became something deeper, something forbidden, something neither of them planned but both felt slipping into their lives before they could turn away. Their bond grew quietly, hidden behind passing smiles in the hallways and stolen moments in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. But nothing inside that mansion stayed secret for long. The wealthy family, protective of their reputation and furious at the idea of their son caring for someone they considered beneath them, began to watch Clara closely. Disapproval turned into hostility, and whispers behind closed doors became confrontations she had no power to fight. Yet the billionaire didn't back away. He defended her, stood by her, and tried to shield her from the tension building inside the house. But every step he took toward Clara seemed to intensify the pressure around her. The mansion, which was just a place of work, slowly transformed into a place she felt trapped in, unsure how much longer she could stay without losing herself entirely. And then something happened, something Clara never spoke of again, something that shattered her trust in the mansion and everyone inside it. Whatever it was, it pushed her to gather what little she owned and disappear in the middle of the night, without saying goodbye, without leaving a note, without giving the billionaire a single clue about where she had gone. She ran because she had to, because whatever chased her out of that house was stronger than the feelings she once allowed herself to hold. Mary would grow up never knowing that her mother had once lived a life completely different from the one they shared. She would never know that Clara's warnings, her guarded answers, her fear of wealthy neighborhoods all came from scars no one could see. And yet, the narrator reminds the viewer gently, but the billionaire wasn't telling Mary the whole truth. Not even close.
Before we go any deeper, if you're still watching, still following every twist, drop a comment saying, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly locked in to this story. Mary finally gathered the courage to ask the question burning inside her. "Were you in love with my mother?" But the billionaire didn't speak. He didn't nod. He didn't deny it. Instead, he walked across the room with a heaviness in his steps. He reached for a locked drawer, the same one he'd always kept shut. And when the key turned, Mary felt her heartbeat quicken. Inside was a single item, a letter. Old, faded, and written in her mother's handwriting. He placed it gently into Mary's trembling hands, and as she unfolded it, the room seemed to freeze around her. Clara's voice, through ink from 10 years ago, whispered the words that shattered everything Mary thought she knew. "If you're reading this, it means they found us." They? Who was they? And what had Clara been running from all this time? And suddenly,
everything began to make sense. The real danger wasn't the billionaire. It was the people standing behind him, his family. Years ago, they saw Clara as a threat, a poor girl who didn't belong in the marble halls of power. His father, a man feared more than respected, warned Clara to disappear. His sister, cold, calculating, framed Clara for theft just to destroy her reputation. And when Clara refused to bow her head, they forced her out of the mansion, alone, terrified, carrying a secret she could never reveal. She was pregnant. She hid Mary's birth because she knew that if the family ever discovered the child existed, they would come for her too. While Clara struggled to survive in silence, while Mary grew up fighting through hardship, the mansion remained cold, too quiet, too polished, like a place where a crime had been cleaned but never confessed. A chilling pause. But the family wasn't done with Clara, and they weren't done with Mary either. Mary's arrival in the mansion awakened something that had been buried for 10 long years, and the moment her presence was noticed, the storm began. The billionaire's family moved fast, too fast. Cars screeched up the driveway, doors slammed, voices exploded in anger. They barged into the mansion, shouting Marcus's name, accusing him, blaming him, as if Mary herself was a crime. They pointed at her with fury in their eyes. She shouldn't be here. Get her out. She's the problem. And then, one of them reached for her. A beat. Marcus snapped. Don't touch her. For the first time, his voice wasn't soft or tired or broken. It was protective, fierce, unshakable. And Mary saw something she had never seen before. Fear. Real, trembling fear in the billionaire's eyes. A slow, ominous breath. But why? Why were they so desperate, so terrified to hide Mary's existence? And then, the truth finally broke free. Truth Marcus had carried in silence for a decade. He knelt in front of Mary, his hands shaking, his voice cracking. I never abandoned your mother. I never abandoned you. I never even knew you existed. Mary's voice trembled. Are you my father? And Marcus, the man the world saw as unbreakable, began to cry. Yes, I'm your father. Mary didn't know that the truth she had waited her whole life to hear was only the beginning. Marcus wiped his tears and then said something that froze the room. There's something else, something your mother never told you, something that puts all of us in danger. A chilling silence. And with that, a new fear entered the story. Cliffhanger. Marcus didn't waste a second. He took Mary by the hand, led her out of the mansion, and drove straight to the woman who had carried this burden alone for 10 long years. When Mary saw her mother, frail, trembling, fighting for breath, she ran into her arms, and for the first time, Clara held her daughter without fear of being seen. And then, Clara finally revealed the truth she had buried beneath a decade of silence. She told Mary that Marcus's father, a man with more power than conscience, had ordered her to disappear. He wanted the baby, not out of love, but control, pride, reputation. He believed a child born from a mansion cleaner would, quote, ruin the family. So Clara did the only thing she could. She ran. She changed her name. She erased her past. She hid Mary from a world that wanted to claim her or destroy her. She endured poverty, sickness, and fear, all to keep her daughter alive. And when Mary heard this, she broke. All the pain, all the confusion, all the years of wondering collapsed inside her. Mary cried, Marcus cried, Clara cried, and for the first time, the truth finally connected them, not as victims of a cruel past, but as a family. In the days that followed, everything changed. Marcus made a decision he should have made years ago. He cut ties with the family that had controlled him his entire life. No more silence, no more fear, no more protecting people who destroyed the woman he loved and the daughter he never knew. He contacted the authorities, exposed every document, every threat, every lie his family had used to tear Clara's life apart. And for the first time, the people who once dictated everyone else's fate had to face the consequences of their own actions. But Marcus didn't stop there. He took responsibility, fully, willingly, wholeheartedly. He paid for Clara's medical treatment, ensuring she received care she had been denied for too long. He moved Clara and Mary into a safe home, far from the shadows of the mansion, far from the people who once controlled their lives, far from every memory that made them afraid to breathe. And Mary, for the first time in her life, went to school. She carried books instead of oranges. She woke up to safety instead of survival. She laughed. She dreamed. She became a child again. Marcus spent every day trying to mend what had been broken. He begged Clara for forgiveness, not with grand gestures, but with consistency, patience, and a quiet love that proved itself in small moments. And slowly, gently, Clara allowed herself to trust him again, not because the past disappeared, but because healing finally had room to grow. In the end, the truth didn't break them. It brought them home. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, hit the like button. And if you want more powerful true life stories every single week, make sure to subscribe.